places where life experience had deprived him of the completeness of the image of God, that he's supposed to be able to connect, he's supposed to be able to feel good enough to have a conversation, he's supposed to be able to take risks, all of this stuff. Underneath it, he was isolated and he was afraid. And so, if people are going to be formed into the image of Christ, where we are able to relate and we're able to put our gifts to work and we're able to sacrifice and do all this stuff, then what Jesus said is he came to seek and to save that which has been lost. And our groups have got to be a place where we are actively seeking the brokenness. You know the word for lost in the Bible? The Greek word, it doesn't mean God's going, humans, where did I put them? I think, look over by the keys. No, lost means utterly decimated, broken, beyond repair. And people are coming into your groups with emptiness, that they've never been loved. They're coming in there with pain that's never been touched. They're coming in there with skills that don't exist. And our groups have got to be a place where we are seeking to save. The word for save that's used there is the word that means to make whole or to heal. So our groups have got to be a place that seek these aspects of people underneath the issues and then underneath the problems, because God wants to make them whole. And then the third thing is that groups need to be a place where we learn new skills. How many of you came from a dysfunctional family? Okay, now, how many of you did not raise your hand? Okay, now the denial room is down the hall, all right? Everybody came from a dysfunctional family. It's the family of Adam. You know, Adam's family. It's crazy, right? The whole family line of the human race is dysfunctional. And in dysfunctional families in the human race, we have not learned the skills that we need to make life work. See, God gave us His ways that makes us functionable. Remember, I was doing a group one day, and one woman had hurt another woman's feelings in this group, and so we're trying to learn the ways of God, right, and learn new skills. And I said, well, I want y'all to talk about this, and so they had to face each other and start to talk about it, and the group's going to help you. And so they're talking about, well, when you did this, you know, it really bothered me, and well, how'd that make you feel? I'm sorry, and all this. And so lady number 3 is sitting over here, and she's like this. And I noticed her, so I interrupted the first two, and I said, what's going on with you? She said, I've never seen that before. I said, seen what? She said, that. And I said, what's that? She said, well, she was mad at her, and they're talking about it, and they're still talking. She said, where I come from, they be throwing skillets by now. And as we started to talk about that, she never had seen in her life people illustrating the skills of talking with each other about something that bothered them. And see, God has put us in a new family. We were born again to grow up and learn the skills that we didn't learn in Adam's family. Wherever your version of Adam's family was, wherever your own Egypt is, we go to a new land where we're children and born again, and we have to learn these things. And our groups need to be providing those skills and experiences. And the fourth thing is we need to be getting from the group what we don't possess for ourselves. Remember a woman who was in a breakup with the boyfriend and get lured back in and get back together and break up with him again and get lured back in and you know, kind of in that cycle, and he wasn't good for her, but she couldn't stay away, and she would break up, and then, you know, she'd be so sad, and he would call her, and they'd be on the phone, and she'd remember all the good things about him, and she'd go over to his house, and they'd sleep together, and she was in this cycle, and she felt awful. And the group was trying to help her with this. And finally, they just started to say, look, we're going to help you. We're going to talk about this every week until you get out of this relationship, because it's not the best for you and it's not what you need. And so they were just hammering her about this. Well, finally, one day she comes in the group and she says, you guys are not going to believe what happened. And they said, oh, no, you didn't go back with him again, did you? She said, well, he called. And, you know, we broke up and I've been missing him, and he called. And he was just so cool. I mean, all the things I love about him. And he said, why don't you come over? And then I said, okay. And so I hung up the phone and I was about to go over. And then she turned to one of the women in the group and she said, and then you started to yell at me. In my head, she goes, all I hear is, what are you doing? What are you thinking? And then she pointed to another and said, and then you said, don't you know that God has something better than this for your life? And she pointed around the room, and see, she had internalized from the group what she didn't possess in her own soul, and that is the fruit of self-control. She didn't have it. It never had been implanted in her, but the group gave that to her, and like the way that God designed us, we internalize from others what we don't possess on our own, and groups need to do that. So what produces this safety? Well, number one, people feel safe when they know the rules. People feel safe when they know the rules. Sit down with your groups and say, what do we want to be here? Do we want to be a group that expects each other to speak into each other's lives? Do we want to be a group that actually gets below the line over here and starts to talk about things that aren't easy for us to talk about? And people will do what we have established as normal in a group. And if we tell them what the rules are and we give them buy-in into that discussion of what do we want the group to be like, that produces safety. Otherwise, people don't know what they're supposed to do, and they'll go right back into where they have the 10s and the 5s. But if we've said, we want to go down here, and that's the expectation, then that sets kind of the path. But we need a path. Number two is we need a structured path to take us there. See, if you take people that are used to processing life and talking about all their issues and this, that, and the other, and you throw them in a room, they're going to do that. But if you put people into a small group that have never done that, they need a path. And one of the ways you can do this is with good materials. You can have good questions. You can structure the activities in a way that give them, specific kinds of, here's what we're going to do tonight, or here's what we're going to do this quarter, and the path is laid out right before them because they don't have this inside of them. My 7-year-old had a birthday recently. Somebody gave her a little box of questions, and now at dinner, she brings her box of questions. And she goes, okay, everybody, we're going to pass it around. Everybody reaches in and they get a question. And you pull these questions and it's like, incredible stuff. Like, what's the most violent thought you've had today? It's not like that, but it feels that way, right? But it gets you talking. And it's really been fascinating around the table how just giving a path to talk about things makes much more talking happen. So as leaders, think about the path that you're using, and is it one that will cause this to happen? And then the third thing, just give a language. Think about your language. What I find is in groups, every group, I think, needs 2 or 3 little sayings that become, they're like surfboards that you can ride over some of these hard waves. I've got an accountability relationship where we just, been keeping each other accountable in all of life for a lot of years. And we have a phrase in there that it's something like this. Okay, I've got a James 5:16 thing. Everybody know what James 5:16 is confess your faults or confess your sins to one another. And so instead of like groveling and and having, bad attitudes, or I did this or whatever it is, and kind of trying to get out of the badness, if we just say, I got a James 5:16 thing, then it just is a lot easier. And in groups, if you can figure out a language, like, okay, sharing moment, okay, coaching moment here. Once you hang it on a label, it takes away the sting. I've got an employee that was into that book, The 4 Agreements. And the second agreement, I think, is don't take things personally. And so when I'm giving feedback, I'll go, agreement number 2. And she goes, okay, I'm ready. Because it reminds her, this isn't personal, it's a way to get better, the feedback I'm about to give. So think about language and what that does. The next one is safety comes from helping each other. I remember a man who was petrified of his father in a group. And he was kind of sort of a wimpy guy that walked around in life like this, you know. And finally the group was going, you know what, this is ridiculous. Let's call your dad. Right now in group. And you've got to disagree with 3 things he says. And the group seriously did this. The guy gets on the phone, calls his father across the country, and this man was probably 45 or so. And he picks up the phone and goes, hi, Dad. And the whole group is like standing around him. It's literally, some had laid hands on him. Except for this one lady who was so afraid of confrontation. She's like... and he's talking to him and he goes, well... You know, you buy tires at those discount houses, and you know they're not good sometimes. And he would just do a normal disagreement, and then you see him hide, and then he said, "Well, I know we have earthquakes in Cal, but you guys have all the tornadoes or whatever." And he disagreed 3 times, and the group's going, "Yes!" And at the end of the phone call, when he got off the phone, I said, okay, I want you to look at yourself. He said, what? He was standing up straight. See, the group entered into his space, and they helped him. Most of the times, we don't feel safe to take the next step because we've never been helped. And we need to help each other to grow and find experiences. Somebody's afraid to go sign up for that course. Send somebody from the group down to the admissions office with them that week. Or. And then safety is produced by modeling. If you're above the line as a leader, in other words, if you feel safe with taking your 2-ness and putting it up here above the line, model that. Be in that group over here that, doesn't practice denial. Say, gosh, I really lost it this week with my kids or whatever it is. And then people catch that. And then the next one is establish group norms. Because a group will enforce its norms. It's one of the laws of groups, all groups. And if we talk about this and say, okay, we want it to be the norm here and whatever we decide the norms are. I was in a group one time that we wanted it to be the norm that we were a group that gave to each other and sacrificed for each other. And that was an overt value. And in that period of time, there was a couple in there that started to go through financial difficulties. Really good people trying everything possible. One thing hit them after another. And a very proud man. And the group came together and said, you know what, we're going to support you. And the group started writing checks, and he could not take them. And the group said, no, this is our norm. We're giving, and you're going to receive. And it was a huge breakthrough in his life because they had decided upon that norm, and they were going to enforce it. And then the last thing that I want to mention to you this morning is that safety comes from talking about where safety comes from. Safety comes from talking about where safety comes from. Here's what I would suggest. Sit down with your group and say, you know what, I want this to be a safe place. What is safe for you guys? And have them tell their stories of what didn't feel safe to them, maybe in a group they've been in before, in their growing up years. What's like really unsafe feel like to you? What is it that we would do that would make you feel unsafe? Because we want to not do that. And what would help you? I remember a woman said, I want feedback, but if you guys could just tell me, before you give me feedback, just tell me that you like me first, and then give me the feedback, and then tell me that you still like me. We said, you're joking, right? She goes, no. And so we would say, okay, Susie, we really like you, and here's something we think you ought to look at, and we really like you. And she goes, oh, that's much better. And she learned to not need that anymore. So safety comes